Welcome to another edition of AARP Foundation Experience Corps in the community. My name is O.S. Owen, and I am your host, and I'm the volunteer recruiter for the AARP Foundation Experience Corps program. We seek those that are 50 and over to be volunteer tutors and mentors for first graders, second graders, and third graders in the Chicago Public Schools. If you love children, if you love to read, if you are looking for an opportunity to increase your sense of purpose, and if you want to make a difference in a child's life, then we have the right opportunity for you. Give a call at 312-660-8662. That's 312-660-8662. I am so very excited today to have in our studios Gerald Griffin. Gerald, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you.
He has done so much and such a prolific author. He's a sculptor. He's Chicago's Renaissance man. He's a poet. He just does so much, and I'm just so excited that I'm going to ask Gerald to tell us a little bit about himself because I just can't get it out. Thank you, Gerald. Please tell our viewing audience who you are.
Gerald Griffin, born here in Chicago, on the northwest side of Chicago. Went to high school here, college here at the School of the Artists of Chicago, and I'm an artist. I have a art gallery, design center with my wife, that's about it. I do a little work here and there.
You're so cool with that, and I'm just so excited. The fact that you're an artist, and our audience doesn't know, not only is he an artist, he is a painter and a sculptor. And these are both different disciplines. He's a graduate of the School of the Art Institute. Everybody don't get in there. The fact that you and your wife have a design center on 83rd in Princeton on the south side of Chicago, this is big stuff. And I'm just blown away by how cool you are about saying this. And I'm just excited thinking about it. Let's kind of get into it a little bit.
Okay.
This is we're coming to the last of Fine Black Arts Month. And you did a phenomenal talk on a panel.
Thank you.
The first part of October at DuSable at the Roundhouse. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about, the monuments. We were talking about fine black arts. We were talking about all of these things in public spaces. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you, so you can share with our viewing audience, what is fine black art?
So, that's kind of a loaded question in terms of fine art. Anyone can create original art. It could be a 5-year-old, they do a crayon drawing. It's original, it's art, that's original art. I think fine art is art that is one, created by an artist who is, developed in his craft, two, an artist who creates art to say something. As a conversation, as a expression of an emotion, and art that has a provenance to it. So a history, real art is art that is created from your soul.
Real art. So we put these terms out there to kind of distinguish. However, I like that. Real art is what?
Art that's created from your soul.
Art's created from your soul.
I would say.
One of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Samela Lewis. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Art is not a luxury, as many people think. It's a necessity. It documents history. It helps educate people and stores knowledge for generations to come. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're talking about that,
okay.
In this world of public space, art is everywhere, and we were talking about the monuments. And the discussion was saying that, these monuments, shouldn't be torn down, should not have been torn down. And I liked what you said about that. Do you recall that conversation?
Yeah. So I had the monuments I'm working on, the way that they came about. I had just had a solo show at a museum in Lafayette, Indiana. Art Museum of Greater Lafayette. And the title of the show was The Paradigm Shift. And it was a series of about 35 pieces of art that were based on 35 original poems. And then the art, whether it was a painting or a sculpture, was a visual interpretation of that poem.
Ah.
And
okay.
many of the sculptures and the art contained this idea of social commentary, or spoke to these narratives about contemporary social issues based on historical instances or historical narratives. And so I was already in the vein of doing some three-dimensional work. And when the George Floyd was murdered, and there was such a visceral reaction from not just the Black community, but communities all over the world. The reality of the volatile society that we live in was just kind of laid before us bare. And I think as a collective of people, African Americans were kind of slapped into reality about the position that they hold in society. And they look around and they see all of these different symbols and monuments and things that help to reinforce this idea that you're less than, you don't belong, your story is untold, you're not part of the history.
That's right.
And I think the initial emotional reaction was, well, we need to tear these down. We need to rip this stuff apart. This is, these are the lies that help perpetuate situations that would allow a police officer to feel comfortable murdering somebody on TV. So that was the initial reaction. And in watching this, my thought was, well, if you tear down that, although it's romanticized and it's racist history, there's no history up. So generations later, people can say, oh, well, that never happened. Robert E. Lee wasn't, Thomas Jefferson didn't have slaves. So these people, there are no monuments that tell the full story. So I did a proposal. First thing I did, I made a proposal. I sent one to the city. I did another one. I sent one to the state senator. And in my proposal, you keep in mind, the majority of the country was locked down with COVID. Businesses were closed. People were struggling for how we're going to make ends meet. And I had this idea that if artists could be employed to create, instead of destructing, constructing some art that would be a counter narrative, or that would tell the rest of the story.
Reflective of what's going on.
Reflective of what's going on, but also reflective of a true history. So Thomas Jefferson, for example. Thomas Jefferson, president, wrote the Declaration of Independence, great leader. He had a lot of good attributes, but he was a conflicted individual. He also owned 600 slaves. He actually raped one of his slaves and had kids by her, Sally Hemings, who he kept in slavery. So his slave family was in slavery, and his free white family lived in the house. So when you see a statue romanticizing or memorializing Thomas Jefferson, then it's only telling of the regal things he did, and it's giving a skewed. So for a white kid, he sees that, he feels great. Oh, wow, Thomas Jefferson, it looks just like my dad. I feel good, great America, boom, I'm patriotic. Black kid, you see that, and you're just thinking, okay, well, this is just another guy who is glorified, and I'm nowhere in the picture. So my idea would be to create a monument of Sally Hemings and her kids and have them standing right next to Thomas Jefferson. Because now you're telling the full story of who Thomas Jefferson was, the time that he lived in, and it paints a different perspective, not to degenerate Thomas Jefferson, but to tell the true story of who this guy was, and in turn tell the true story of who we are.
That's outstanding. I like that. Now, did you become a poet first, a painter first, or a sculptor first? You talked about your 3D show. What came first? Was it the chicken or the egg?
So I think that as people, as Black people, we have a lot of talent within us.
Yes.
And so people know me as an artist, a painter. People know me as a sculptor. They don't know me as a writer. They don't know me as a musician. They don't know me as those things. They don't know me as a guy who plays basketball. But I mean, there's really many facets to who an individual is.
Yes.
So for me, there isn't really a difference in painting and sculpting, and it's all part of the same mental exercise for me. So if I'm doing a sculpture, I'm just basically painting with, with clay, or painting with wood, or painting with stone, painting with metal, or drawing. It's all the same idea. And it really doesn't matter if it's a different style, because I do different expressions of art. So it could be something that's, non-representational abstract. It could be something that's cubist. I did a whole series on cubism.
And what, for our listening audience, what is that?
So Cubism is a style that was introduced to the world by Pablo Picasso. Different artists like Pablo Picasso and Magritte, a lot of these different artists from that modern art period, Modigliani to some extent, they're all doing this cubist art. And Picasso started this after traveling to Africa and looking at these African pagoda masks and batik patterns, and he started doing those, replicating those in his own artwork. And people were like, "Oh, wow, what is that strange exotic stuff he's doing?" It's called Cubism. So, for me, doing this series of Cubist art, the Cubist style art, was a call out to the fact that has its roots in the African legacy of African masks, batik patterns, pagoda patterns. That's all Picasso was doing. It was almost like Elvis Presley, where you just rename it and claim it. So, but in my Cubism, I put a little spin on it, and I would do an image inside of an image, or what I call dualism or contemporary Cubism. So, it's a little different, but it's still the same concept.
Okay.
And it's you're creating kind of these flat planes, flat two-dimensional drawings. Now there's an artist, Miro, who there's an artist, Miro, who became ill, and he was bedridden, and he couldn't paint anymore. So he started cutting out these little paper things, figures, and pasting them around, and that's where this idea of collage comes from. Innovation.
Look at that.
Because of a necessity to be able to work and not being able to do it. So this is a way that he can express himself.
And being a true artist. Expressing yourself in any way that you can. Okay.
So this is Black Fine Arts Month.
Yes.
And I have many people ask me, what is black art? How do you define black art? And I think you can define black artist, but art is art.
Ah, look at that. Look at that.
My first solo show was a show called the Urban Landscape Series. It was all landscape paintings at Philly Gallery when it was in the River North. And looking at the art, you'd never know that this was a black artist, white artist, because they were all lush landscape paintings. So was that black art because it was created by a black artist? Or if a white artist did a painting or a sculpture of a black person, is that black art because the subject matter is black? I think we get caught in this whole idea, this construct of black and white, because to a large part, this country was founded on this idea of separating black people into a subcategory so that it would be acceptable to then exploit them and use them as a commodity. So this whole black-white thing came about.
Okay. I like the way you define that, and not by the art, but by the artist itself. Now, some of my favorites, Basquiat's. When I first encountered that, I just didn't understand. I was like, this looks like, gibberish, this graffiti. But as I began to look and learn, and I had a certain feeling, what did Basquiat give us?
Well, I think Basquiat, in a number of ways, Basquiat was an untrained natural artist who just was expressing himself, like you said, graffiti art. But the reason we know Basquiat is because of Andy Warhol.
Yes.
So Andy Warhol kind of introduced the high art world to this artist who he basically anointed and said, Basquiat. But there's a million Basquiats in a black neighborhood, in a black community, that go undiscovered because most of our recognized success is when you're recognized by a white institution or a white person or a white celebrity or a white gatekeeper. Then you're saying, okay, well, this person is worthy. And many of our artists are recognized that way. And I think that as a community, we have to grow to the point where we decide, who our artists are. Not that I'm not taking anything away from Basquiat.
Right.
But this idea that, you won a MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant, so now you're a genius. But yesterday I was doing the exact same thing. Was I a genius yesterday? Or I didn't become a genius until this white guy said you're a genius. I didn't become a great artist until this white guy said you're a great artist. We are stuck in this race construct where your talent and your abilities and your sensibilities are negated until they're recognized by a larger society, which I think is a major problem and a major reason why we continue to suffer a lot of the social ills that we do.
Now, out of this social unrest, racial unrest, all of these artists had an opportunity to present themselves. So we could look possibly at some quote-unquote new Basquiat, some new talent, some new individuals that are expressing themselves. What do you say to that?
People will ask me, someone, like you mentioned about art and what Samantha Lewis said about the importance of art. And I like to say that art is so important that if you could trace time back to the furthest time known to man, prehistoric man, so to say, and go into the caves, you'll see art on the caves.
Yes.
Because it was that fundamental to their life. It was that expression of who you are, that creative impulse was there. That creative impulse is something that has been embraced and practiced throughout societies in antiquity. It doesn't matter the culture, whether it's, Africa, Egypt, Rome, Greece, what have you, the Mediterranean, China. Art just permeates everything.
Yes, it does.
The architecture, the houses, the doors, the bowls, the clothes, everything. Because people understand this idea of your culture kind of reverberating through this art. Art speaking to you on a number of different levels, on a spiritual level, psychological level, as well as a visual level. And that idea helps to keep a tradition and keep cultures alive for generations and generations.
For generations to come, to store to come.
Yeah, I think it's one of the, just to say this last point, it's one of the big reasons why during the transatlantic slave trade, what became unique about slavery in the Americas was that there was a severing of all recognition of who you were, by taking away your language, taking away your family members and separating you out, taking away your art, taking away your capacity for reading and writing, and let's take away everything and strip this person down to a bare minimum, and then we can remake them how we want and chain them up and do whatever kind of atrocities. After those chains are removed and this person is told you're emancipated, you're free. But where's all the other stuff that you took? Where are all those connections? Where's that language? Where's that culture? Where's that thing that is gone from us? And as a collective of people, we I've heard it said, black people are lost. They don't have any connection to their history. But if you go back and you look at those paintings on the Egyptian walls, you look at some of those from thousands of years ago,
stolen legacy,
25, 30,000 years ago, what you'll notice is that all of the women had braided hair. You would see bas reliefs of someone braiding someone's hair, which is the same thing that our grandparents did and our mothers did. So even with all of that severing, those traditions still exist within us.
Well, the truth crushed to the ground will rise again. If you're just tuning in, we're here in the studio today with the artist, the poet, the sculptor, Gerald Griffin, and he's talking about fine black art, and not just fine black art, but about art in general and how it's self-expression and the importance of it. My name is O.S. Owen, and I am the volunteer recruiter for the AARP Foundation Experience Corps program. We seek those that are 50 and over to be tutors and mentors for first graders, second graders, and third graders in the Chicago public schools. If you love to read, if you love children, if you're looking to increase your sense of purpose, if you want to make a difference in a child's life, we have a phenomenal opportunity for you. Please give us a call at 312-660-8662. 312-660-8662. Now, Gerald, you have something that's called Seeking Inner Significance.
Mm-hmm.
Expound, please, for our viewing audience.
Well, there's a poem that I wrote that's called Escape. And I did a painting as a visual interpretation of that poem. And the painting shows this water scene, and you can actually see underwater. There's someone underwater, and you see in the background some 16th century slaver ships, and this person has jumped off the ship, and they've escaped. And on the left side of the painting, way in the background, you see these mountains as Africa would have been in antiquity. But on the right side of the painting, you see city skyscrapers. So it's a historical scene, but it's talking about a contemporary idea. And the poem says, we're living in the present, chained to the past. The 13th promised freedom, but it didn't last. I dreamed of equality, woke up fast, like sleeping in a feather bed filled with broken glass. The plantation is shut down, but no black man is free. The prison industrial is the new slavery. They've substituted the noose and chains with crime scene tape. But today, I'm gonna remember me, today I will escape. So the last stanza of Today I Remember Me, Today I Will Escape is this idea about us remembering who we are beyond the experience of slavery, beyond that period, 200-300 year period, in the lifetime of the people that go back thousands of years. Mm-hmm. However, you have a society who wants to define you by those 2 or 3. It's like me trying to define who you are by the things you did today and yesterday, and to disregard your entire 50 years of life. Mm-hmm. So we have to get to the point where that inner significance and understanding who we are as people. So I try to have these conversations through art. I try to bring up these interactions. Like historically, art has had that.
Okay. What came first? Did you write the poem first, or you do the painting first?
So the poems came first.
Okay. So the poems always come first?
Well, in this particular series, because there was some poems, and someone made a suggestion that I should write a book or come out with the poems, and I decided to do a series of paintings or sculpture that would be a visual interpretation of the poem, and that way when we had the show, the painting is here, the poem is next to it, the sculpture is here, the poem is next to it, and people can read the poem and see the painting and kind of see, really get a idea of where my mind or my creative expression came from in that particular piece.
Now, speaking of sculpture, you are a phenomenal sculptor. I've seen some of your stuff virtually from your studio. And can you tell our viewing audience, where your studio is?
Our showroom is located at 8237 South Princeton. It is a 46,000 square feet building that me and my wife redesigned from an old vacant warehouse and turned it into a luxury interior design showroom, which features museum art gallery, design showroom, retail offices, event space. It's a nice facility, and it's a place where, as a collective of people in a community, I wanted us to be able to go to a place and feel at home, and not have to always go outside of your community to have something nice.
Okay, all right. Now I got to ask this. Mm-hmm. What's the story about Kamala?
Okay, so the Kamala MVP.
Kamala
MVP, which stands for Madam Vice President. It was part of my historical narratives monument series, and as I mentioned with the Thomas Jefferson, I wanted to create this body of work that changed the narrative. Historically, artists have created pieces of Martin Luther King, of Malcolm X, so every year Black History Month comes, we have like 10 people who will recognize as Black. But there were countless stories that make up who we are historically, and then those new stories that are being created today. So Kamala represented one of those new stories. And that piece was actually one of the first in my Monument series that I did, and I did it before she was nominated as the vice president. I did it when she was a candidate to be the president.
So you were predicting the future.
Well, I thought that it was important that at this point in history, you had a woman who was of Indian descent, of African American descent,
Yes.
who was a major candidate to be the
Yes.
president of the United States. I mean,
Yes.
she was in the running, and I thought that story, the fact that she was a HBCU graduate, the fact that she's an AKA, all those things that kind of make up who we are as people within our society. She kind of reached the pinnacle of those different things. And I thought that was important that she be recognized. So I did this bust as a example. Remember, I told you I sent proposals out to the city and everybody and said we should make, instead of tearing down, we should build up. I didn't hear back any. It was crickets. I didn't hear anything from anybody. So I said, well, maybe they can't visualize what I'm doing. So I started these maquettes. I started creating some pieces. I did one of Obama. I did one of Kamala. I'm working on a life-size piece of Frederick Douglass. And I said, well, I could do that and people could see the example and they'll see, because I imagine that piece, that bust, being, like 5 times life-size on a pedestal out in the public square.
Okay.
So that you have this, you create a different conversation. And not just in the public square in the black community, but in the main public square.
Public spaces, yes.
Public spaces, yes.
Well, in that same vein, the piece that Richard Hunt did on Ida B. Wells, share with us, why that is so significant and so important to us.
Well, I mean, Richard Hunt is an iconic artist. He's been creating significant works throughout his life. He's a treasure within the black community. The one thing about his works, though, they're abstract. And within the African American community, there's still a growing appreciation for, or even understanding of abstract art to that extent. And Ida B. Wells was a strong advocate against lynching.
Yes.
And if I had no consciousness of who Ida B. Wells was, no consciousness of abstract art, I might miss that idea when I passed that Richard Hunt piece. As I just, wow, this is just like 3 legs, 3 pillars. I could read the narrative on the bottom, but if I'm standing across the street, my consciousness doesn't connect that to Ida B. Wells, which is one reason why I'm doing these representational sculptures, because I think that the struggle we have is so real. You almost need a real kind of representation for you to latch onto that'll spark and start that conversation.
Okay. Well, like anything else, it takes all types to make the world go round. It takes all types of artists who are willing to put their self-expression out there. And I want to say thank you for taking that risk. You put your work out there in Word, in oil, in acrylics, and in clay, and you take the risk of being criticized. You take the risk of people, saying we don't like it, we don't understand it. Thank you for taking that risk, and please continue to do so. In the time that we have left, I just have a few more things I wanted to ask. What would you tell our young, aspiring, artists, whether they're sculptors, painters, acrylics, writers, singers, and especially on the tail end of this civil unrest, what would you say to them? And even those of us who are, like myself, seniors, what would you say to us to inspire us and motivate us to just don't stop and to go ahead and make it happen?
I would say what someone said to me before, make your mark. And whether that mark is with a marker or with a piece of wood or a piece of stone or sculpture, make your mark. It will become something that is a family heirloom or something that is foundational. It'll outlive you. Like those bronze sculptures that I'm doing will outlive
last forever.
Me my lifetimes.
Yes.
And how do we know about Basquiat? How do we know about those cave paintings? How do we know about, because those artists made their mark.
And Gerald Griffin is definitely making your mark. Well, as we're wrapping up another edition of the AARP Foundation Experience Corps in your community, many thanks to our phenomenal, fantastic, outstanding producer, better known as the Black Butterfly. I am your host, O.S. Owen. I am the volunteer recruiter for the Experience Corps program. Give us a call at 312-660-8662, and we hope to see you at our next edition. Be well and continue to stay safe.